All right, almost start this thing all over again. Ciao, como stai, hola, salutations, hello, 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 all that happiness. I have an observation, and that observation is I think the whole formality of men's clothing and women's too, and tailored clothing, I think that crowd lost everyone in the heat of summer. I'm almost certain that that is the time of year where everyone just felt, I'm not going to wear anything really uncomfortable when the temperature reaches a certain level. Here in the United States, which has been the largest economy in the world for several decades, which means Americans collectively have the most buying power, and subsequently it's not just democracy that is ruled sort of by the mob, it is the free market. I'm here at the mall watching everyone walk around in super light artificial fabrics, whatever variation. It doesn't matter what they're wearing. The point is, it's obvious that just for the aspect of price consciousness, mass-produced clothing can be made in artificial fibers, and so artificial we mean, the latest the two sisters polyester. We know they dominate. They do because it's orders of magnitude, mass production, and scale. The two sisters polyester can also be made to be very light, which isn't how I remember them when I was very young. Polyester, or polyester, the two sisters, used to mean something was plasticky feeling and uncomfortably warm. As football jerseys sometimes still are. When you buy jerseys from different companies, that's still a weird thing. However, as I look around the mall, and I'll show you, why not? Look around, the different people are wearing, all the men are wearing shorts. Most of the denim's actually being worn by the females, which is interesting as an observation. And that's neither here nor there, it's just an anecdotal observation. But the clothes being worn by the people, especially the men in the shorts, is clearly polyester, and it's clearly polyester that has achieved a level of refinement, whatever criticism you want to make for it, where it's just relatively pleasing and pleasant to wear. And I'm wondering, contrasting that with what you see mostly coming out of the mouths of the various, fashion content creators, especially in the men's space, that are talking about, vintage this, heritage that, vintage this, heritage that, natural fibers, all of which technically I agree with. The problem is everyday average people aren't overly concerned with standing out and finding their own narrative. That's what I am overly concerned with. Everyday average people who buy clothes en masse aren't overly obsessed or concerned with why men aren't wearing suits and why the formality has gone out of everyday wear. They just want something comfortable to wear in the moment that's seasonal and not demanding too much of them. The modern fabrics that are mostly artificial give them that. And my whole spiel is, when are the fashionistas, the heritage guys, the content creators, and people like myself, you don't have to embrace polyester, the two sisters, that's what I've always called them, but you've got to be realistic about how the hell this stuff fits into reality. A really cool content creator that I'm only aware of his content on YouTube and Instagram. I don't know if he's available on TikTok, so forgive me, TikTokers, or did a celebrity fashion video that was unusual in the sense that it was focused on Arnold Schwarzenegger's fashion from the 80s instead of yet another video on somewhat long dead like Steve McQueen. Paul Newman hasn't actually been gone that long, but the golden age or silver age of Hollywood, the 60s. And I always found that weird. Not that you can't hold up a Cary Grant or Humphrey Bogart or any of those guys as fashion icons. It's just that it's so painfully obvious that that era was profoundly different, and the social expectations and the type of fabrics and cuts and everything that everyone had access to, it was a completely different dynamic. Why do so many content creators will just not shut up about an era that's clearly not going to return, at least to the degree that they're trying to venerate? And they're almost talking about this like they don't know what they're talking about. Similar with military stuff. You know, I get it. As a former veteran, I'm here to tell you half the stuff that these people are talking about, fatigues and all that stuff, the shit's not that comfortable. Take it as someone who's retired Navy, because in the military, they don't give about your comfort. You're there to perform a task. The utilitarian aspect of everything supersedes your bullshit need to be stylish and look comfortable. Even the vaunted leather jackets, they served a function. And it's always hilarious to me, because of course they're cherry picking uniform. They're not actually trying to, you're not wearing, flame retardant combat, stuff. For Navy, the uniforms that are worn on ship have been required to have some level of flame retardancy, as well as other stuff for decades. And guess what? The chemicals that are added to that stuff to make it better and more flame retardant are caustic and cancer causing, and make the fabric stiff and unmalleable and less comfortable, all of that stuff. But yet there's, again, a whole section of the subculture of men's style that won't stop telling, you gotta get this flight, you gotta get this bomber jacket, you gotta get all that stuff. Yes, all the stuff is cool, nice, and everything. You're better off with the civilian version of it, because it's a little bit more comfortable and a little bit easier to wear for everyday stuff. Like, you're gonna get this flight jacket and go fly a plane any damn way. Most of you don't know what the hell. If I talk about the UCMJ, one of the veterans, not to be overly political, but an active duty Air Force officer stood on the steps of the Capitol a day or two ago and called for the impeachment of the president, which is a massive illegal violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which I am still subject to as a retiree. And so us people who are actually served and actually wore these uniform things, that's kind of the stuff we think about. Some companies, sometimes companies aren't even American, will try to sell you some piece of military kit or gear. Pilots just adore their flight jacket. I did 20 years in the Navy, more than half of it in naval aviation, and only saw on a couple of occasions actual naval fighter pilots walking around in the leather jacket. Usually they get issued that down in Pensacola, and because it's a controlled item, they kind of throw it in their closet and, maybe bring it out every now and then, but it's not part of it. They're not thinking about the leather jacket. They're thinking about their careers. They're thinking about flying the next day. They're thinking about being the best officers they could be, The marketing on all that stuff and its effectiveness with a certain part of the male population never ceases to be a source of entertainment. As I just had a conversation with a follower about getting him some fatigue pants. Most fatigue pants, although very comfortable and very durable and very well made, it's just too hot, and I'm not going to bother with asking the guy where he lives. Clearly he lives someplace where it's not going to bother him, and he can deal with it and everything. I do have a few pair of fatigue pants, and as you will see if you peruse my social media with any normalcy, I don't wear them very often unless it's wintertime. Which brings me back to my original point. In wintertime, and the winter clothing and the heavier garments, that would be your occasion to try to bring more men back into the thought press of dressing more properly, correctly, stylishly, with layers and all that stuff. Kind of like what Ralph Lauren is doing. And it's funny because Ralph Lauren is openly embraced in some circles and criticized as not manly enough or authentic enough in other circles. The guy, Ralph Lauren, is going out of his way to try to preserve a lot of the heritage and Americana of clothing. And I'm sweating because it's triple digits, yet I'm wearing light enough denim, so much denim that it's extremely comfortable. I'm sweating because I've got a hat on. Men want to be masculine and respond to things that make them feel masculine and make them feel trendy and part of the pack, like dogs. And so I'm taking a page out of Ralph Lauren, and first of all, I'm going to try to do a better job of addressing comfort level in hot weather, and I'm not going to abandon the ideal of natural fibers, but a better argument needs to be made and more access needs to be provided, because what were they doing in super hot times 100,000, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? What did the ancient Romans do when it was super hot? Well, they got the hell out of Dodge. They either went high enough in the mountains if they were poor, and if they were wealthy Romans, lived along the sea or traveled to the sea in the summertime for the breezes in the north. But what they wore was a lighter, thinner, more finely tuned wool, which is contrary to kind of what we're harping about. I have been harping about, I just put a video on there about linen and seersuckers. Seersucker, right now, and of course it's a Ralph Lauren seersucker that is no better made and no better fitting than the seersucker shirt that I have made for me. It's just that I just kind of grabbed this one out of the closet. But wool that is thin enough to be worn, warm weather wool, super lightweight wool, is a different story. And it's funny because none of the so-called quiet luxury people or quiet luxury brands, or that wasn't something that was really brought up during that whole trend. And it's people, there's so much to unpack on all this. Anyway, it's the heat of summer. It's the heat of summer that's doing it.
A very nice and peaceful setting.
It is. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Enjoy your day. And see, this is what Texas people can be nice. Lovely woman. The heat of summer, I think, going back 50, 60 years ago, I am certain that there were probably both working class and professional men who were wearing clothes that were comfortable, but wish to God they didn't have to put on all those layers and be formal. Remember, I said, and I'm sorry if this video is too long, but I think it's really kind of important. And, if you don't want to watch it right now, I'm going to link this whole entire video to my blog, of course. Thought to themselves, I would love to just be able to go to a baseball game or an event or whatever and just wear one or two, a button-up shirt and a t-shirt under it, or even a t-shirt, which is something you didn't see done unless people were in tight quarters in the black and white movie era, these giants and everything. The greater population probably craved less formality, because as soon as the workplace instituted the whole thing with Casual Friday, and you didn't have to think about that, lower your workload and probably be a little more comfortable, people embraced it. No one had to have a gun put to their head to start leaving their tie at home or their suit jacket at home going to work. And subsequently, again, in hotter environments like today, where the sky looks like this, even though it's a beautiful day, none of the men that are walking across this field, most of them don't so much as have a collar on, right? And that is helped by the fact that more modern artificial fabrics have been refined to the point where you can do that and be comfortable, and that's all they want to think about. So, I can't vouch for anybody else, creative, whatever. I can't, I see aspects of things going, again, like, I see aspects of why this is an issue from both sides, from different creators. But for me, I think it's important because I don't really like spandex, polyester. I don't mind spandex so much. I'm just not that big a fan of polyester, but if it's light enough and it works for a particular purpose, okay. But it's just not realistic to sit there and try to browbeat people into all natural fibers all the time when comfort is the issue, unless you're just being, elitist. And the thing is, which is, the thing is that unless you're using wool, 100% cotton is okay, but, it's problematic that you'd have to prove that it is as cool to wear that, depending on what you're doing, as the polyester stuff, wouldn't you? I don't know. I don't have anything that is even, I think, 60% wool that I would wear seasonally. This is a Ralph Lauren seersucker jacket, seersucker shirt, and it's clearly 100% cotton, 97% cotton, you know. And then, of course, these are Ralph Lauren seersucker. I mean, these are like $250 jeans. They're 100% cotton. So I don't even know how you would sort of take menswear at the formal level and move it into the direction of accepting the polyester when clearly the informal crowd has done so. Anyway, this is a 16-minute long video, and I'm sort of getting my different, it's wrapped around the axle at different points. My only real main point was, I think summertime and dealing with the heat was when men's clothing, or one of the major factors in motivated men to move away from formality. You know, that's the whole deal with the 17-minute video. So let me know what you think. I'm going to try not to let this fall. And I'm sorry this video is as long as it is, but not sorry, because sometimes you gotta be, part of adulting is being able to actually watch and pay attention to something that's longer than 2 or 3 minutes or a minute or whatever, and interact with people and have different ideas and focus on the things. And I don't want to act like a hypocrite, because I've got expensive shit on right now and I feel exceptionally comfortable, but I'm the only one out here even in jeans. I mean, a lot of the women are wearing denim, but it's still denim shorts. So let me know what you think. And like I said, if you know, start this video and then quit watching it while you're on, I totally get that. I will link this to the blog later this evening, and you can watch the whole video on my blog at your leisure and sort of interact. All right, au revoir.